And welcome to the LVN Member Spotlight. I am Bree, Chief Marketing and Revenue Officer at Big Hand, but also editor of the LVN newsletter. And today I'm joined by Julie.
Hello, hello.
Julie, thank you for joining us. We'll jump straight in. So for those who don't know you, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and the challenges you're facing right now?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. I've been in legal almost 20 years now, which is kind of shocking. And it hasn't really been a straight line. So I started as a paralegal, I went to law school, I litigated for a number of years, and then I went into firm administration. So I was most recently a chief revenue officer at $100 million Midwest regional firm where I ran, rates, pricing, intake, billing, collections, LPM, profitability, the whole gamut. So, but now today I am the director of client success and delivery at AAC Consulting. And it's really similar, but for 20 years, I really owned one firm's kind of numbers and data and everything. And so now I get to see all of that play out at dozens, if not hundreds of firms across the US, the UK, and Canada. So it's been a lot of fun from this perspective and certainly a lot of learning.
Amazing. And you get to put all your years in practice into way more firms now across the globe. And I guess
Yep.
with that, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing legal value and pricing professionals today?
For sure. I think it's the same thing everybody's thinking of every single day. And I think it's AI. Right, because there's that pressure question
Yeah.
of if your attorneys can do things more efficiently, why am I being charged the same? Why aren't those cost savings being passed along to the client, right? And then on the other side, you have all of the software vendors, right? And that's real capital. That's real
Hmm.
cost out of the partner's pocketbook. So your partners are asking the same questions too. Like, what is my return on investment in this software piece? But I think at the same time though, so I came to legal, I graduated from law school in the middle of a recession. And so I have built a career on always being asked about how to do more with less. And I feel like this is one of the first times where I'm actually being asked to do more with more because we're getting these AI tools and we get to
Hmm.
play with them
Yeah.
and get to find those efficiencies. So I find I'm so much more efficient. The busy work is being automated and I get to spend my time on the fun stuff.
And how do you think you're seeing law firms respond to that in terms of the efficiencies are there, the demands from clients for those
Yeah.
efficiencies are there? How are you seeing law firms respond?
Well, and for sure, it's always that we are not outsourcing the judgment, right? So AI can help us research faster, understand case law faster, and even from an administrative point of view, I can research outcomes and trends across dozens, if not hundreds, of cases that my firm has handled without having to scroll through like time
Yeah.
entries, right? I've done that. I've coded through it. So, if anything, it's taken away a little bit of that mystery, but it doesn't take away the judgment and it takes away some of the busy work, but we still have to check it, right? It still
Yep.
makes stuff up, but it just helps us spend 80% of our time on the thinking and the outcomes that are going to provide more value and only 20% of the busy work that gets us there.
Yeah. And ultimately, the value of the service you're buying is still the same. You're still
Yep,
getting the
yeah,
same outcome. Yeah.
absolutely, but a better one, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, indeed. What's one trend in the legal industry that you think people should be paying more attention to?
I was so excited to see this question because I've had a kind of a personal side interest of like following what has happened to like physician practices in the United States, and it's coming. It's coming for
Yes.
legal. So I've really been following MSOs, management services organizations, very closely. Everything that's happening in Arizona, but it's outside of Arizona now, right? So we have these companies coming over, taking over the back of the house operations.
Yeah.
So, for everybody in LVN where we tend to sit in the back of the house, what does that mean for us 2, 3, 4 years from now? How are our partners going to view what we're doing? I think it's all really fascinating.
Yeah, it's been so I'm based out of London, and it's been on this side of the pond for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely making its way across for sure, and will make for very interesting times.
It will, and for all of us who, maybe struggle a little bit with the inefficiencies of law firms and, just the basics of like, why can't we get a bill out like on time and accurately? Like sometimes I think like, oh, if only we had some private equity efficiencies here, but that's a whole can of worms that's going to be hard to pack back in. So it'll be interesting.
It's the business of law side, right? It's getting increased
Absolutely.
results. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's one common misconception about legal pricing or legal value, that you'd love to challenge?
So I love to challenge the idea that every attorney knows their own market's pricing best, right? And so
Hmm.
first of all, I've never won an argument by contradicting anybody, right? I could have all of the data in the world. I could have every marketing report. I could pull public data showing them that the pricing is not what they think it is. But you're just not going to win with attorneys, right? Trying to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
So what I love to do is spin it and say, okay, help me be your best advocate, right? What is who is our competition, right? What have we charged in the past? How are you going to staff it? Let's look at the margin and the cost structure because I've sat in those executive committee meetings where a random new client will pop up or a new practice line will pop up and they'll
Really?
say, "Hey, Julie, what do you think about that?" And, it could go two ways where if you've spent some time with me and we've dug into it, maybe I don't buy it completely, but I understand your perspective. That's a really different conversation versus, hey, they're saying X. I don't see where that data is coming from, and then that can go in a different direction. So it's definitely interesting when you get the buy-in versus, someone who is just this is how it goes.
This is the way we've always done it, right?
I
But
know.
it's interesting. I was looking at data, new data that we were working on, and it says that 28% of lawyers price a matter based on the last similar matter they priced, but they're not looking
Yep.
at the profit margins. They're not looking at
Or
the
not.
discounting that comes down the line, and that's where those conversations come in really valuably.
Absolutely. And just, the basic question of, well, how might this engagement be even just a little bit different from the last one? Because a favorite argument is that everything is unique, nothing is the same. Well, okay, let's talk about that. And let's talk about how that might alter the pricing here.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, you got me.
What the communication of it all. Um, Looking back in your career, what's one lesson or experience that most shaped how you approach your work?
I think for this one, I always think of this example. So I'm from the Midwest. So I once made a $92,000 error at a law firm. And at some firms that's like less than a rounding error. For me, that's an immense amount of money. And so I was helping a partner in a bankruptcy practice file our proof of claim, and it's always hectic. It's always last minute. Every time's coming in from everywhere. We got spreadsheets, filing deadlines, like the perfect storm every single time. I was throwing everything together and missed the disbursements, right? And the costs were 92,000, and I found it the next day. And you have that panic, right?
Yeah.
Of I could say nothing, right? And this will
Yes.
come up 3 months from now, and I can be like, "I don't know what happened," right? I went through kinda every different scenario, but at the end of the day, I took a deep breath. Back then, I walked into the partner's office, right? Because we were all there, and I explained to her what happened, and she took a deep breath, and in her kindness, she said, "It's okay. We're going to file, a motion with the court." We called it a scrivener's error. I loved that one. And the court was fine with it. We added it to our proof of claim 3 months later and it was fine. And then we took the opportunity of like how could this not be a hot
Yeah.
mess every single month? And so it gave us a little bit more motivation to be proactive, but not only in how I handled it, but also how she handled it was just so wonderful. And that's been just such a guiding light. Like own it early, and tell the person who needs to know so that they're not surprised by it either. And that's how, I work with my employees as well.
It's a good story, but also a great lesson. And the biggest part is then you learn from it, right? Because we
Oh,
only learn from the mistakes. Yeah.
I know. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, how has being part of the LVN community influenced your thinking or your career?
So LVN has been huge, right? And LVN has
Yep.
shaped my career really kind of more than any job. And of course, for so many of us, these connections predate LVN. I
Yeah.
was thinking about there's this Umbria user group like back in 2016 where I met, like Andy George and Rodney Miller and Rainer Frederick. Like everybody was there and it became P3, now LVN. So it's fascinating how so many people that I met back then are still the same people I reach out to for advice and guidance today. But I would say the other part about LVN is, you scroll through LinkedIn and you feel like everybody else has it figured
Mhm.
out, right? And from a firm perspective too, right? Someone's posting about this software, this process, and you're just like, everybody has it figured out than me. And then you get to LVN and everybody's talking about the same things, right? The
Therapy.
challenge of the challenge of partner buy-in, how hard it is to get IT's
Yeah.
attention, that extra FTE wasn't in the budget. So if anything, it's just been this camaraderie too, that whereas LinkedIn shows you that highlight reel, like LVN is where you get like the working file and what's actually really happening and gives you that breath to then go back and like fight another day. It's okay.
Mm, nice. Um, Fast forward 5 years, what excites you most about the future of legal value and the role that LVN can play in it?
I just had to check my calendar because I was like, what is 5 years from now? So that's 2031. Sometimes I think it's 25, other times I think it's 2027. So I have just been fascinated how everything is branching out and getting so specialized, right? We have people like in their second decade of being really specialized in, either pricing or mass tort legal project management. And I feel like the larger our firms grow, the more we can invest and the more people getting into the spaces we're getting more specialized, and I think it's a blessing and a curse because with the specialization becomes people who can be so much more effective, really deeply ingrained in those practice areas.
Hmm.
But then we could also get really siloed, right? That you've got this really myopic view and you forget that maybe there's outside counsel guidelines that affect your world. Or you forget that, these attorneys are working on different clients and their whole world isn't your whole world. So I love that LVN kind of sits right in the middle of it to kind of keep people from either getting too deep or too broad, and that you're constantly talking to people and exposing yourself to others to kind of keep it all connected, if that makes sense.
And with your consultancy hat on and your experience, what advice would you give for those who are in very specialist roles to be able to keep that communication line open and work with others?
And I think it's just what you said. It's seeking out those opportunities. You have to be proactive to connect
Hmm.
with other people, right? And and it's hard, right? I try to set up virtual coffees or connects and something
Yeah.
always comes up, right? There's always the
Yeah.
day's fire drill, but it's almost something I keep on my priority list of like I have to do one a week. And if it's on my checklist, I've got to do it because almost every conversation or interaction, it fills my cup from a human standpoint. I learn something new. And so I think it's just encouraging people to keep that priority because 10, 15, 20 years after I met
Yeah.
people, I can still pick up the phone and ask for advice. And so sometimes if you don't make that investment, you'll miss out in the future.
And in a world where AI is taking over, that human element is more important than ever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're asking each guest, what question would you like us to ask the next guest?
So I think for me, for the next guess is if if you could wake up tomorrow and AI has solved your most irritating problem, what problem did it solve?
Oh, what a great question. And the question for you from the previous guest
Oh no.
is, so I'm going to try and flip it with a consultancy. How are you seeing teams interact? Seeing pricing teams
Mhm.
interact with other teams like technology and innovation, and how is it impacting pricing?
Absolutely. I think how it's how the interaction is coming together is from a core data set, right? And it's the garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's getting all of that data, whether it's in a data lake house, it's hooked up to Harvey, something like that. And so the teams can come together. They're using the same data set. Maybe they've set up a combined project, right? In whatever AI tool that they're using group chats. And so these things aren't happening in a vacuum. We're even seeing people, building skills, right, with repeatable, consistent outputs. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. And so those practice innovation groups can get together with pricing and, of course, use the historical data, right? This is what
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing, this is what's going on. But the innovation group brings the here's how things are different,
Yeah.
right? Here's how this client's different. Here's how the attorneys are different, things like that. And then the data, of course, where the pricing people are, are going to bring the
Yeah.
numbers. And, I think layering all of that on top of the efficiencies that we're gaining from AI, you get better output, usually quicker, right? Probably a bit more creative. And it's just been really fascinating to watch.
Good answer. Thank you. We're going to jump into some quick fire questions. The first one is describe the legal market in 3 words.
Always changing constantly.
Good. Who's someone in the legal industry that you admire and why?
Uh, for this one, I admire deeply and greatly Beth O'Connor. So she was the founder of AAC Consulting. She was literally in the room when these law firm financial databases were written. And she's worked with hundreds of firms since then. And just the amount of institutional knowledge she has about law firm operations, how they keep their books, it's almost never ending, the stories and the war stories she has to tell. And she's a large part of the role I hold today. And, a big champion, a friend, and a mentor.
She sounds great.
She's amazing.
What's one thing law firms should start doing in 26/27?
Magic wand, law firms should start doing daily contemporaneous time entry and releasing it into the system. That would just be magical.
And what's one topic you'd love to see debated at an LVNX conference that might not be top of the list right now?
Item to be debated at an LVN conference. I was almost thinking of like old school versus new school, right? Of
Oh,
all of
sim-
the AI evangelists kind of square up against, someone who
the
may
Excel
be
spreadsheet
a
lovers.
little bit more old school. Those of us who don't want to get rid of our pivot tables because there is so much of the learning process in the doing,
Hmm.
right? And that, when I put together that data set, I may see it versus if Claude is doing it for me, I may not be following every step that he's taking. So there definitely is, a benefit and a loss for sure.